Welcome to Bankole's Nation. I'm your host, Bankole Thompson. Thank you so much for joining us and staying with us for this week's episode. We're looking at the results of the November 5th general election, where Donald Trump is set to become the next president of these United States. How did Democrats fail to capture Michigan and other battleground states? We're speaking with Ed Sarpolus, a veteran Michigan pollster, who is explaining why Governor Gretchen Whitmer could not deliver the state of Michigan. We're also talking with Jonathan Kinloch, the chairman of the 13th Congressional District Democratic Party. He's also talking about why the party failed in Detroit, what investments ought to be made in the future. We're also speaking with Daniel Baxter, the chief of operations for absentee voting for the Detroit Department of Elections, about what happened and how the Vice President Kamala Harris's voter turnout was so low in Detroit. And then my visit with Dr. Michael Busuito, a newly reelected member of the Wayne State University Board of Governors, speaking about the vision for the university and its urban mission. It's all coming up on this week's episode of Bankole's Nation. Stay with us. Let's welcome a veteran Michigan pollster, Ed Sarpolus, the president of Target Insight here in Michigan, on, of course, responding to the 2024 presidential election here in Michigan. Ed, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
I want to begin by getting your response to the election results here in Michigan. Your take. You've been following this. Are you surprised by the outcome?
No, actually, I'm not, because we knew where Trump was going to end up. And basically, we've learned from Hillary Clinton, Vice President Harris never broke 50%, almost either was tied or below Trump the whole campaign. And in the past history, if you can't get over 50% consistently, you're going to lose. And then the other thing is that if I go back to, excuse me, to 2019 and 2020, I remember doing work with the Michigan Black Caucus. And we said one thing that was very obvious with Kamala Harris is the reason why I suggested that the caucus endorse Joe Biden and have her as VP, because she had no connection with black males or white males or any male. Okay, and so if you look at the results nationally and in here in Michigan, she really got bombed by males, not specifically black, but males in general, and she never addressed the issues what the cause. And then you saw, and when I look at the numbers, I mean, she's actually, in some cases, doing worse than Hillary Clinton did in Michigan. If I look in turnout, as a matter of fact, I think the focus of this for your listenership, let's look at Detroit. In Detroit, in 2020, there was 257,614 voters showed up, okay, out of the city of Detroit. In 2016, it was 248,760. And 2024 was 246. She had less votes in Detroit than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. Okay, so there was a drop-off.
Right, and I think that owes itself to a get out the vote campaign. I think days leading up, on weeks and months leading up to this campaign, to this election, a lot of people have been saying, and I've been hearing it, that they've seen no lawn signs, they've seen no real activity in Detroit regarding the Kamala Harris presidential campaign.
As a matter of fact, Trump had more signs in Detroit than Harris did. You're driving around the outskirts. And number two, they even discussed the issue of Detroit, get out to vote on MSNBC yesterday. Okay, and their commentary, they were hearing about problems in Detroit, getting things off the ground. Now you can blame Delaware, you can blame the whole thing, but I mean, I'm looking at a consistent problem in Detroit over decades. Since the Coleman Young era, we don't really have an efficient team in Detroit to get out the vote. We just don't. There's no machine. You know that because you've been parked there, you've been around that type of thing, and we always have the same problem. They wait till last minute to show up. They don't introduce themselves. And in the Hillary Clinton mode, they didn't learn from Hillary Clinton. What is the male issue? Yes, she was smart and say it's about her being the first woman president or the first black woman. She didn't talk about that, but she didn't address any male issues. It's all about women.
Right. So, and I take the position, Ed, that I think that they overplayed the abortion issue. Do you agree?
I
I think
agree
they
because
overplayed their hand with it.
in the end, it would say the economy and jobs, which in Detroit, it's when we talk to black males, let's say because Detroit is heavily black, the fact they don't want their handouts. They want to say, give me my tools so I can be successful. Give me something so I can get to work. When I've done a lot of research in Detroit, they're not looking for a free lunch. They're looking to help me get some work. I don't mind getting the sweat. They never addressed that issue.
Yeah.
Granholm had that problem. Whitmer has had that problem. Debbie Stabenow's had that problem. I mean, all women who run in Detroit, they forget that there are men in Detroit. Okay.
Yeah,
And
and that's what I was thinking, that the abortion issue was overplayed. But let's go to Macomb County and Oakland County. Uh, it appears as if, and I've not looked at the actual numbers, that Trump may have gotten more votes out of Macomb than Kamala Harris getting more votes out of Oakland County. Can you verify any of that?
yes, I haven't I could probably go on the screen and tell you.
Hmm.
What you did find happening is that, I mean, I can check that out for you because I can go on the thing and we take a break here. But
Right.
what the point being is in Macomb County and versus Oakland County. In Oakland County, we had the flying black attorney running for probate court. She spent no money on a race and she beat Mike O'Brien, okay, a long-term incumbent. Oakland County is very strongly building an organization of professional women, everyday women, helping get out the vote. Because when I talked to Ms. Richards when she was running, I says, "Where do you have any funds?" So bottom line, she won on the courtesy of the women of Oakland County saying, "You're one of us. You're smart. You're dealing the fact." And even though they didn't hear much about her, no name ID, because I did some research, she still won. Okay. In Macomb County, there was no gift of benefit. The Democrats were sitting home in Macomb County, so there was really no hope. But at the same token, Carmelinga, he lost about 1,000 more than he lost last time. So he actually broke better than people expected. But and he had a hard time because he was going against everybody against him. And this time, at least they gave him some money to run.
Right.
So in a normal year, Carmelinga would have beat John James.
So looking at the statewide, though, Governor Gretchen Whitmer was projected. She was on the top surrogates for Kamala Harris. She was out there on the abortion issue, giving the impression that the people of Michigan will decide this issue based on reproductive rights. Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who's seen as a rising star in the Democratic Party, could not deliver Michigan for the Democratic presidential nominee.
Well, that's not unexpected. She's never had a strong candidate. Bill Schuette was not a strong candidate when she ran the first time. Okay. Tudor Dixon was a non-existent candidate. Okay. There was no campaign. I mean, in matter of fact, and when she ran in 222, she was last minute trying to figure, can anybody help me get votes out of Detroit? Anybody can help me, whatever like that. Everybody's waiting the last minute. Remember, she lost. She didn't win Detroit when she ran in the primary.
Yeah,
People
yeah,
forget.
she did not win Detroit. I remember that in 20. Yeah,
Remember that, okay? And that's true whether it's Granholm or Stabenow or all of them. They just don't understand. You got to earn the right to run in Detroit. You got to show up, and whether you run for judge, and they don't do
so,
that.
so you are not surprised that that Whitmer could not deliver the state of Michigan because
No, she never talks. She's never out on the street banging doors about bed and brother issues. It's because she made her whole thing on COVID and the women's issue, but she forgets. When I look at Don Regal or Carl Levin, and I look at all our strong statewide candidates, there's more. They're never single issue. Okay, her only issue is this. She's never expanded that, other than fix the damn roads. Okay, they don't understand. You got to talk to people. It's not everybody. It's even 53% of the vote is female, but what about the male vote? There's nothing. What about the young males? There is no conversation in her. Okay, she won because she's had weak opponents. She's not won because she was a stronger candidate. You got to remember. You remember when Bill Schuette ran
right.
against her. Remember, Attorney McClellan, the $6 million that he ran for Bill Schuette gave to Bill Schuette when he was running for the Secretary of State.
Mm-hmm.
McLean, Republican, gave the $6 million the next time, not to Schuette, gave it to Gretchen to run and win. So she's always had that easy race. She's never been really tested. in a tough
So
race.
yeah, so she's never run against a strong candidate, but the media created this big profile of Whitmer as if she was going to be this, she was going to seal the deal. But to your point, she won election and won re-election because she's run against a weak candidate.
Right, and she was given the state house seat, state senate seat, when she was Easton last thing. She's never had a seat that she's had to work hard for. She's always had the money. She's always, shared someone else through fundraising. She's a sharp lady. She's done a lot of great things, but she's never been tested. She would never been able to take on the Detroit Lions. She doesn't have the skills. You know, you got to be tough. She hasn't been tested. She's not been tested yet.
So what happens now with Democrats losing? What happens now with them losing this election, as far as Michigan is concerned?
Well, the question is, have they learned from it? Because you and I have done a lot of work over the years. The union and the labor group back in 1990, when they lost the governor's race, they continued acting like they still controlled everything. They controlled the party, they had the money and everything. They didn't change. So they end up losing everything, and they basically labor's left Michigan because they can't win here because of the fact that they lost all their clout. Okay, and so the Democrats, from my understanding, Laura Barnes, as right now, is not going to run the state party. Next time around, she wants to move on.
Should Laura Barnes run again, or she should step down as chair of the party?
For Laura Barnes, I'm more concerned about her health. Okay,
Mm.
when she's been around for a long time, she's taken her knocks. Okay, she's done something. Okay, she's never had the money like predecessors had, the access to money, because most people had that proceeding had access to money rating fundraising. She's really had difficulty because she doesn't know a lot of people. Okay, and then she's always dependent who brings the money. Lavora, the point being is right now, who are the Democrats going to get to do the job? If you're going to retire, you could have it. You can make the 75 to 100 grand. On the side of you.
But I think one of the questions that came up. I've been talking to several people. One of the questions that came up is that Democrats will have to do clean house. Will have to do an entire house.
What is the clean? There's nobody there. What are you going to clean? Okay, I'm not going to mention names, but when I looked at Detroit, since 1990 they've hired the same people to get out the vote, and they've never done to get out the vote. It's the same people. You know that. I don't have to tell you.
Yeah.
It never changes. Yeah. It's the same one or two, three people. That never changes.
And I was, and I was concerned about who the Detroit operation for Kamala Harris. I mean, what were they doing? What did they do? The fact that she got less votes this time, then less people came out to vote in Detroit than in the previous presidential cycle.
Well, the difficulty just reminded me of Michael Dukakis. Mm-hmm. Everything was being run out of Delaware versus Massachusetts. Okay, the money wasn't coming fast enough. They didn't have anybody who had their smarts together to what to do. When Obama came in, basically there was a whole team in here. Okay. They took everything over. The same thing with Bill Clinton in 92. When he brought in people, they weren't running from Arkansas, they were running from Michigan. Okay, they had a team. Ever since Bill Clinton, there's never been any candidate, whether president or in-state, that really said, what do I need for Metro Detroit? And the bottom line is, who's there? Okay, Mike Duggan has not groomed anybody. Okay, there's no development out of him. He's going to be leaving and maybe running for governor. What he's left behind, the only thing I remember in Machine is what Coleman Young left when he retired.
And Mayor Mike Duggan's son,
Ed Duggan.
Ed Duggan was the one running Biden's campaign for the state of Michigan.
Well, true, because that's what Duggan wanted. Okay, that's some clout for him, access to thing like that. I mean, that always happens. It doesn't mean that Ed's not a good guy, but
Ed Duggan could not deliver Michigan for Kamala Harris.
As a matter of fact, you understand when Mark Schauer ran for governor.
I remember.
Okay, well, I don't know. You remember I talking to you, and the fact is, I was screaming at to get on to take over the job. I said Ronnie Peterson. Remember that? Mm-hmm. I says that Ronnie had to come in because they messed up the whole black community statewide. I said, Ronnie, they've messed up Detroit and Flint and everywhere. They messed everything up. When Rodney came in, he got it turned around as much. But the problem is Mark Schauer on election day, less than half the people in Detroit knew who he was. And Rodney couldn't do it by himself. It's the 90-day campaign. So the bottom line, there has been no commitment in Wayne County or in the state to focus on the Black community. Okay? The last time even look at Flint. The last time that happened is when I worked with Mayor Stanley, and we tripled the Black get out the vote and AV vote in a March campaign. Okay. But you got to get people who will willing work and know what's going on, and you have to do it on a day-to-day basis.
Right, right. And one of the questions that came up was, what experience does Ed Duggan have to serve as senior advisor for the Biden campaign for Michigan?
He's never run a real estate. I don't know if he's ever won a very tough race. He works for his dad, but his dad runs his own.
Has he ever run a presidential campaign before running, Biden, serving a statewide campaign?
Oh, but you got to understand,
Go ahead.
Bankole, you got to understand that I run is like, who are you, Ed? I won't even do it. He says, we work for Obama. Anybody who worked for Obama, whether it was a water boy or anything, they're the experts. They know everything. Okay. Right. I think, no, you don't. Okay.
Yeah.
If you remember in the Obama era in 12, I was one trying to save John Conyers because he was trailing in the polls and had no money. Okay. I had to go around that whole machine to be sure.
I remember when you walked with him on the signature issue too, with the debacle.
Yes. Yeah.
When he was being set up to lose.
Yes. But I came in because, like, you and I know each other. You know what I've done in the past. I learned from the best. I've been mentored by the people who could actually get their hands dirty. And then I lived in Detroit. That doesn't exist. All the good labor people are retired or gone. Okay. Or they moved out. The checkbook for labor is not in Michigan anymore. You know that.
So the issue now then is, where does this leave the UAW? Sean Fain and all these what do I call Democratic, pillars of the Democratic Party. Where does this leave them? Because they have to go back to the drawing board, right?
Well, here's the problem. When I was working on some county commissioner seats, and as you know, I was a consultant and I was a full service supplier for Al Williams when he won that commissioner seat down in 20% Black district down, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If I was going to pick somebody now, because he's learned how to do it, when I spent the time with one is Al Wilson. He's from UAW. Was over 30 years, 40 years, but he learned about walking, going door to door, doing all the other stuff. They need somebody who's actually have done it on the door. Frank Garrison, he's gone, but when Frank Garrison was doing everything, because he grew up in the 50s doing it. Okay. Tell me who at labor movement has actually done it on a regular basis. They don't exist. The lieutenants don't exist. I look at the congressional chairs in the Democratic Party. They don't have experience. All the people are retired or gone. After Jimmy Settles left and Roy Gabel, who's there that had nobody does. The only people left who's been doing it for like 30 years has been Eddie McDonald. That's it. Bernie, the county sheriff, Benny
Right.
Napoleon, his team is gone. Where are they? There is nobody left.
Yeah.
And then I've called them and I talked to Benny. It's like, now if you try to get in and try to help them, it's like, well, gee, I'm going to make $40,000 a month. Hey, I don't want you to help. It's like, we're going to do that. And then I was told, because like, I remember I had to get John Connors to fight for me because at Connors, I said, they don't want me here because I'm white. He says, no, Ed, you're going to.
Right. So I'm just curious. You mentioned Eddie McDonald, who's a veteran campaigner, has worked on campaigns and so forth, and and you have Ed Duggan, whose notoriety came about simply because he's the son of Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan. That's
correct.
That's about it. And he's at the top of the food chain on a presidential campaign that basically could not deliver.
And then Eddie McDonald, he's never done statewide. He's pretty much done things in Detroit. He ran Benny Napoleon's race, and that didn't go anywhere. I'm just saying is that you've got what by your expression, you have good people in Detroit, but they need good management. Okay. Everybody that I meet in Detroit, they need somebody who has experience and who can manage them, because they are hard workers, but no one has helped them to teach them what to do. Okay.
So what happens at the Democratic Party in Lansing now? What happens now? What happens there with the party?
Well, the bottom line is to basically, Elisa Slotkin becomes for all intents and purposes, actually, Gary Peters probably will be the next person up from a. So basically, it's his party.
He's a senator now.
Yeah. Yes. Now, if I was Lisa Slotkin, because Gary Peters doesn't believe in coming back to the state, because he's stuck, he does a lot of work in DC. I don't want to tell you that he's lazy, but he doesn't do a car 11. If you remember in 2000, I remember that between Spence Abraham and Debbie Stabenow, Carl Levin did more TV interviews, and he was not even running around the state in 2000 because he understood he had to be on the street everywhere talking to people. Okay. And Lisa Slotkin, she could use this as a levy ground to build her because next time she runs in 6 years, they're going to come after her because, the state is becoming, a tough state.
Yeah. I think Alyssa Slotkin is going to face a stiff challenge the next time around because, but I'm just looking at the national outlook as far as Michigan is concerned. The national media, everybody was looking at Michigan through Gretchen Whitmer. The New York Times, magazines, national magazines came.
Whitmer has not done anything.
Profiles on Whitmer made it look as if she was the savior of Michigan. And
yeah, but remember, everybody that works for Whitmer, what is their job? To make their boss look good. No, this ain't, this isn't Star Trek where the captain of the ship really is the best guy. Okay? No, you have people who've been pumped up to be this great person. Okay.
Right.
When I was in Detroit getting my wings clipped, I knew Coleman Young knew what he was doing. I didn't have to worry when I was sitting in the office with him. And I tell this story. I meet him for the first time. He's offering me a half of a sandwich and some bean soup because he said, I know you didn't have lunch. Okay. I still remember that's pretty cool. This young guy getting, sharing his lunch with the mayor of Detroit. But I'm saying is when you look at the leadership, where did she come from? She had an easy time taking on Terry Lynn Land. Every race she's had has been easy. She hasn't been tested. Okay, yeah. But when you've won it by such large margins, Republicans didn't want Bill Schuette. Nobody wanted him. So she got a free roll. When she was in the Senate, she didn't have to work in the House. She's not been tested. Doesn't mean she can't learn things. But what usually happens in a case like this, you find people maybe in their 60s, maybe in our age range, would you mind coming out for a year or something like that? Because do it, okay? Right, teach some mentors. There's no mentoring, okay? And I know Lavora Barnes has not had time to teach. They have some good staffers to do institutional things, to getting the job done. But the ground game, managing a whole state, seeing the bigger picture, that takes work.
So final comments, Ed Sarpolus, a veteran Michigan pollster, president of Target Insight. Your final comments on the 2024 presidential race as far as Michigan is concerned.
It happened because that's what it deserved. There was no preparation. There was no forethought and looking ahead. Nobody looked at the data, okay? I've already mentioned to the fact that the Dems probably lose maybe up to 7 state House seats. Okay, and that's exactly what happened. Okay, because I went back, looked at the data from 2000. I've been talking for weeks on WWJ, a number of years. I says, this is what's going to happen. It's going to come down to the mail vote and basically, Hispanics, because that's also a big common thing that happened in the state. They never addressed that. I kept complaining, in fact, I remember Bill Clinton doing the number of midnight runs to Detroit. Remember that, flying in? They did nothing to create this, you are important to me. Bill Clinton in 92, what did he do? Remember he did the Cobo Hall event, sit down with Bill Clinton? Now, he didn't change his tune when he went to Macomb County, but he made Detroit feel important.
Yeah, you have to make Detroit feel important.
Yes, but they never, who taught? Remember, when has Vice President had the experience? She came from California where everything was done for her, okay, because of the big money. Clinton came because he was doing it for years because he came from Arkansas. There wasn't a big machine. You got to have people either on your staff or work with you. I don't know about you. In all the 50 years that I've learned the fact, when I read somebody who's just been around for 50 years, but no one's been given the hard task, I can always beat them. This works that way.
Well, thank you so much, Ed, for being here.
My pleasure.
I'm not on my parents' health insurance anymore, and I work for myself doing a bit of everything. So I found a plan for just $34 a month.
All plans cover doctor visits, prescriptions, emergency care, and more. Healthcare.gov is here for you. Enroll by December 15th.
All right, let's welcome Jonathan Kinloch, Wayne County Commissioner, who is also the chairman of the 13th Congressional District Democratic Party. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
I want to begin with the election. Obviously, we're looking back in terms of what happened here. I looked at some numbers. The Vice President Kamala Harris's performance in Detroit was lower than Obama's in 2008. And I'm just curious, from your take, though, was there a real ground game here in Detroit for the Harris campaign?
And you saw in this election, you saw for the first time people able to vote utilizing the early voting locations, as well as no reason absentee. Those weren't part of those previous elections. What I saw was a lot of mailings and a lot of contacts driving people to the early vote, as well as to return their absentee ballots. But the campaign sort of lacked a sense of coordination that you've seen in previous elections to those years that you just mentioned. So,
right.
From the standpoint of engaging a lot of the local political groups throughout the city of Detroit who happen to have the tentacles in the various outreach in various parts of the city of Detroit. That didn't show up in this election.
And it's interesting you said that, because weeks leading up to the election, people kept asking, and I've seen comments about just the bare minimum of lawn signs. People were asking, like, we don't see any lawn signs. It doesn't look like there's any energy in Detroit as it relates to the Kamala Harris campaign. And I remember very well when Obama was running for office in 2008, there was a lot of energy. I mean, the presence of the Obama campaign was felt organically all across the city and beyond. But in this case, with the Harris campaign or with Democrats, we did not see that happen.
So the energy was there, but what you did not see was a lot of build out on that energy. The campaign had a different approach. Like you mentioned, lawn signs. Lawn signs were hard to come by, but they became available in the past couple of weeks. But they were, it was a different campaign. It was definitely a different campaign from what we've seen in the past.
Right.
And the approach. I know that the mayor of the city of Detroit called a number of groups together. He understood the importance of engaging the local political apparatus in the city of Detroit. And so I know that there was a pitch to the campaign, to the Harris campaign, for some resources to be able to build out that type of infrastructure. But I didn't know, but I wasn't aware or heard that there was some follow through on that.
So the mayor of Detroit made some requests to the Harris campaign for some support to build out a grassroots campaign.
Yes, it called together a number of us, the congressional districts, a number of grassroots political groups, and some of the other nonprofits that engage in this type of social justice work
campaigns.
Absolutely. And so there was a meeting that was held, and I do know that he was trying to organize and get some resources. So I'm not sure whether or not those resources came.
Yeah, it's remarkable seeing what has happened now, and of course, the bigger question though is, Democrats basically failed in this election. And I'm curious in terms of where you think this takes the Michigan Democratic Party moving forward.
Well, the biggest thing, Bankole, is you saw, no matter what, that the party has to go back to understanding the major importance of Black votes. It's demonstrated in this election how important Detroit vote is. And I think that the hands-off approach, or instead of drawing people into the campaign, is something that need to be a serious lesson learned when we talk about statewide offices. You see how close the U.S. Senate race is, and you see
Very close.
what's happening
Extremely close,
now
yeah.
with the results associated with the presidential race. There was some sense that people felt that you could win statewide elections without Detroit. I hope that that tent has been clawed off of individuals' eyes with eyes who think that. So the Democratic Party, we have to begin to have a broader conversation of the type of policies that we speak to. Women abandoned the vice president in this election as well. So we got to make sure that we're homing in on issues that reaches the broader sense of our umbrella that we like to talk about. So we're going to have to do some serious dissecting as relates to how we handle our campaigns moving forward. So I can just that I can tell you is something that I'm sure that the party as well as our Democratic partners will be having.
Yeah, and some people have been talking about saying that it's maybe time for clean house. It may be time to clean house inside the Michigan Democratic Party. What do you think?
Okay, at the end of the day, we will hold elections. We will hold elections, and the candidates will choose to run for the various offices. I have not spoken to or heard of anyone who will be talking about running for any of the offices. But elections are held, and people will run.
Do you think Lavora Barnes should run for another term, or she should just exit? Lavora Barnes is the chair.
That's for Lavora Barnes to decide. We had enough over the past 24 hours bloodbaths, according to Black folk. So she's a Black female, and at the end of the day, I do understand how it works. Lavora Barnes is the party. Resources and instructions are really coordinated through a conversation, not just by the chair of the party. Chair of the party is the titular head, but it's the stakeholders and the folks who are the wind behind the party and wind behind the plan. So a lot of times, you sit in the seat of leadership, but at the end of the day, there's there's the state central committee. There's a whole bunch of folks who guide and dictate various folks in our roles. So it sounds cute to lay a blame at one person's feet, but that's not how things work in the real world.
Yeah, but and I say that because when Democrats win, she publicly takes credit for it. So does she take credit for this failure in Michigan here? Does she become part of those who take credit for this failure? Because there's a saying that success is everybody's child, failure is an orphan. And go ahead.
So we as a party will have that conversation.
Okay.
We'll have that conversation. But at the end of the day, right now. Right, but there's so many different things that were going on in this election cycle, as much as a lot of what people were ignoring, because at the end of the day, this, in my opinion, this election it should have revealed and heightened to a lot of folks the obvious, and that is that this country still has a lot of healing, because I think what really these results are showing is the misogynistic as well as the racism and the sexism associated with what is at the core of individual decisions when they're making decisions like this. And we still have some healing to do, and we refuse to push away from many of these isms that the country has dealt with down through the years. So we know front and center that race, in my opinion, was absolutely a factor. And so, keep in mind, the only reason we have Donald Trump is because there was 8 years of repudiation of having a Black man in that White House. And so I think there was some rejection there, as well as some flaws in the way that the campaign was executed as well. So that didn't help at all.
And I want to ask you this question because you're inside the party operation and you know what takes place in that world. And that is, why do we always have to keep coming back to this conversation about the Democratic Party taking the urban vote for granted? Why do they come to Detroit when it's late? Why do they show up in Flint, in Bend Harbor, in Pontiac, and other urban cities around the country when it's too late? Why is it that we see very few investment when it comes to the party itself in terms of their outreach, civic engagement with the very communities that they would need to rescue them during these kinds of massive elections?
Well, I have learned to understand and I've often say that the Republican Party don't want Black folk, because issues that are important to us, they do not champion those issues and barely want to even hear about them. Democrats hate that they need us. And so at the end of the day, we have to, as Black leaders within the party, continue to raise our voices and make sure that these type of lessons that we're learning today, that they're taken to heart. Because we have another election in 2 years for statewide offices and whatnot. And so we absolutely need to have a conversation as it relates to our approach, as it relates to the Black vote. The Black vote is the base, but unfortunately, folks kept toiling around in other areas looking for undecided votes, and they basically have blanked around and found out that you still have to come back to Detroit. And so hopefully they figure what we all see today to be true and understand that Detroit is important. So is the other communities along the I-94, I-75 corridor.
Right. And somebody would say, well, at this point, they would hate to be a fly on the wall inside the Democratic Party in Michigan, or even a fly on the wall inside offices where the governor, Gretchen Whitmer, and others are meeting, talking about what is happening. I'm just curious in terms of, because I mean, you are in the party infrastructure, you're part of the apparatus, though. What are you hearing the day after the election? What is coming at you in terms of the party officials and so forth, who basically woke up this morning and could not believe that in fact Donald Trump tore the blue wall?
No, Donald Trump annihilated the blue wall, and so folks are the folks that I talked to are everybody's still in shock. And so, like you mentioned, as far as the rallies and all those things there, it appears that those it was basically smoke and mirrors. I mean, that wasn't real as it relates to what was behind these individuals' votes. I mean, so it wasn't
the Kamala Harris rallies that were
rallies and all those things there. So
yeah.
Yes, and so it just is a lot of questions, a lot of people are conversations people are having, but at the end of the day, we have look, Trump is in the White House, and in
January he's going to be in the White House.
Trump will be in the White House come January 20th, and so at the end of the day, folks who sat up there and voted for him, and because they were upset with the Democratic Party for various issues, you had people who felt as if Vice President Harris did not talk to them. That's some of the conversations people were saying. They were basically creating, the Republicans came in and basically came and spent a lot of money and resources in the Black community in ways that they hadn't done before. And they, saw enough of a pill-off across the country. But at the end of the day, now is, time for us to see, what's next.
And finally, Jonathan Kinloch, chairman of the Democratic Party's 13th Congressional District, do you feel that that perhaps Democrats overplayed their hand with the abortion issue, that they should have talked more about the economy and how do folk in the urban communities and rural communities get jobs and economic opportunities, as opposed to making the 2024 presidential election front and center a reproductive rights campaign?
Well, based on these election results, we should have been talking about a whole bunch of something else. And that something else, I'm saying, we obviously missed the mark as far as what that conversation was about. And it goes back to years ago where they said it's the economy, stupid. And so yes, we may have needed to talk more about the economy and more the prices and the host of other things, but we can't ignore the fact of the matter that women reproductive rights was high on that list of important conversations. But yes, we absolutely could have had a lot more conversation about a whole bunch of other things, because obviously looking at these results, they weren't interested in what we were talking about. Right. I mean, it's very disappointing looking at this, but I think that there were some underlying reasons why people did not vote for this ticket, and I think a lot of it goes back to systemic racism, sexism, and those issues that we don't like to talk about as a country.
All right, thank you so much for being here.
So that was sheer panic. I could look out my window and see the current. There was water coming from underneath my door. I didn't know what to do. I was trapped in my apartment. It was scary. I thought I was going to die. After living in Florida for 50 years, I have never seen anything like this. This was the worst storm yet. So I came here, and lo and behold, there was the trailer outside with the Red Cross and the signs, and I walked in, and they were immediately wonderful to me. They gave me water, they gave you blankets, anything that you need. A safe, clean place. The meals twice a day are amazing. I couldn't be happier. The guys who are in the facility right now, the Red Cross team, they have been amazing. They have bent over backwards to make sure that we have enough to eat, make sure that we have enough to drink, in any way that they can accommodate us. And that if there's one thing that I can pass on to people, you call the Red Cross. They would take care of you. The American Red Cross does it right.
All right, let's bring in Daniel Baxter, a longtime veteran of Detroit elections, election expert, and currently the Chief of Operations for absentee voting for the City of Detroit Clerk's Office, as well as the Department of Elections. Daniel, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Bankole, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I want to I want you to break down some numbers for us. I understand that Vice President Kamala Harris, or the Democratic nominee for president, did not perform compared to the numbers in 2008, that in fact she did not make it to 50%. Is that correct? In terms of the number of voters that came out for her?
Yeah, in terms of percentages, this is perhaps the lowest turnout that the city of Detroit has ever experienced in a presidential election. In fact, when you look at the historical data, in 2008, Detroiters went out and voted by 53%. And in that election, as you are aware, President Obama won. In 2012, same thing happened. We had a 51% turnout. And then in 2016, when Hillary Clinton was on the ballot running against, what's the guy's name?
Donald Trump.
Yeah, there he is, Donald Trump. The turnout there was 49%. And then in 2020, we had a 51% voter turnout. So I think that you can look at that historical data and see that the outlier, which was 49%, held even in this instance. In any given time when there's an election and Detroit has a 51% plus turnout, it seems as though the Democratic candidate wins. So, when you look at these numbers, we were very starkly surprised in terms of the turnout because we had so much going on. Proposition 22-2 kicked in. Individuals could vote early. We started that operation 16 days before the election, and we had a vigorous turnout, unprecedented in that sense. I know you are aware that the forerunner of the voting was satellite absentee voting, and in 2012, when we implemented that, about 25,000 Detroiters took an opportunity to vote early through satellite absentee voting. So when you saw 47,870, in addition to nearly 112,000 Detroiters requesting absentee ballots, and then ultimately 99,000 of those folk actually returning those ballots, the data was just overwhelmingly dictating that our voter turnout would be 51 to 55%. But then on election day, the bottom drops out. 105,000 Detroiters goes to the polls on election day. We were anticipating 125 to 150, which would have given us 51 to 55% voter turnout, adding back the early vote as well as absentees. But, unfortunately, we saw early on at about, I guess it was 11 o'clock.
In the morning?
The turnout was going to be poor. We were hoping for a bang, absolutely prior to the workday. 8, we usually see those numbers spike, particularly in the presidential election, but they weren't there. And it was very modest between the workday, 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And we were hoping that, we would be pleasantly surprised with turnout after the workday. And nobody showed up. I mean, it was it was a steady flow, but there were never lines outside the doors as it was in 2008.
So the actual number this time, what,
47.17%.
Wow. So and then that leads me to my next question, though, because I know early voting was mentioned repeatedly as, a harbinger for things to come. I'm just curious if those early voters were new voters or were they just people who were just on the voter roll?
It was.
Or was it a mix?
It was a diverse demographic.
Okay.
You saw African Americans, Latinos, white folk. Everybody was engaging, ages 18 to 95. So when you saw that, you were mildly impressed. And then on election day here at the department, I think about 2,000 people came in as first-time registrants and voted by absentee. So when you see these lines and everything, when you see all of this evidence, and then on election day, you see, oh my gosh, we're not going to even make the 125,000. We're not even going to make 50%. It's rather disappointing. As an administrator, you're not partisan. You don't really, allow for your personal views and opinions in the process. And as an administrator, you always look for a hearty turnout because that's what we prepare for. As Clerk Winfrey always says, we look to one day see that 100% of Detroiters go to the polls on election day, but it didn't happen on yesterday.
What do you think is responsible for this outside of the what the candidates running ought to do, but just is it that people are just not engaged, not motivated?
So, as you are aware, on October 19th, when we started the early voting here at the Department of Elections, we had this block party. The block party was designed to bring in local artists, perform and draw young folk, 18 to 40, to the event, and then hopefully have an opportunity to engage in the voting process. So we had the Department of Elections open. We had it manned to deal with a population of 2,000 folk voting. But that didn't happen. 6,000 of Detroit's youth came to that block party. They celebrated, they listened to great music, they engaged in all of the festivities of the event, and even the artists, the local artists, in between their particular sets would encourage them to vote now, vote early. And out of 6,000 young folk who engaged, only 400 of them participated. I think that what we're seeing now is a change in guard, if you will, in the political dynamics in the city of Detroit. In terms of those folk that are 40 years and younger, I don't think that there is a mechanism or a know-how, if you will, to engage them, to compel them to vote. And as a result, they walk past polling places. I mean, you would have been sorely disappointed when, after the feature artist, when he showed up, there had to be about 2,500 participants that would, and after the end of the event, all of those young folk walked past the department. We were ushering them in to come and vote. 100 of them decided to turn that corner to go into our polling place and vote early. So I think that, the music was fine, but that definitely doesn't compel young folk to get out and vote. I mean, even notice at some of the polling places, they were playing music, but they were playing music to cars that drove past. Nobody was drawn to that. And I think that that's the problem. There's a disconnect in terms of engaging not just our youth, but Detroiters to stimulate their imaginations, that they might be able to understand how that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is inextricably connected to the ballot box. I think that the messaging that they're using is dated. I think that the methodologies they're using now is insensitive. And as a result of that, people are not excited about voting. When you think about 2008, Barack was on the ballot. This was the first time that a Black person had aspired to the level of being the nominee for the President of the United States of America. He inspired a nation. And I'll never forget, it was about a week before the close of registration, and Clerk Winfrey and I were called to go to a house on the northwest side of Detroit to register 3 senior citizens to vote. So we get there, and when we come into the house, there's 3 sisters, 77, 78, and 79 years old, registering to vote for the first time. And the question was asked, well, where were you born? I said, Detroit, Michigan. I said, okay, you were born in Detroit, Michigan. You were born in the 40s or the 50s. Why didn't you register to vote when you were 21? And they said, because we never had a reason to vote. And this time we have skin in the game. And as such, we want to register and vote in this election. People didn't realize that they had skin in the game. And I'm not talking about the color or the complexion of the individual, but those same issues that existed in 2008, whether it was housing, whether it was healthcare, whether it was education, whether it was finances, whether it was Black Lives Matter, all of that was on the ballot in 2008. And it was on the ballot in 2024, on yesterday, November the 5th. But nobody knew it. Nobody understood that yesterday was bigger than the 2 candidates that were on the ballot. They only represented a philosophy and ideal.
Right.
Problem was nobody connected to that.
Yeah. The missing link. Let me talk about just briefly on election security, because before elections we hear questions, and sometimes there are attempts to cast aspersion on Detroit elections, but we didn't see that this time around. So I assume that the tabulation, everything went smoothly.
Oh, absolutely. So, as you know, I was charged with the responsibility of tabulating all of the absentee ballots that came to Detroit by way of Detroit voters. And we did that for 9 days from the 28th of October, that was Monday, all the way through Election Day. 9 days at Huntington Place in Hall A. We had a plan. The Detroit Police Department, the Department of Justice, and several to ensure that every that participated and engaged in the process of tabulating absentee ballots felt safe. And as a result of those procedures and that plan, we had a positive experience. We didn't have any type of interruptions, no type of issues came up, mischief or anything like that. Challenges were there from the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and everybody got along just fine.
All right, let's bring Dr. Michael Busuito, a newly reelected member of the Wayne State University Board of Governors, who of course ran on the Republican side of the ticket. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Bankole. It's always good to see you.
Likewise. I want to begin though with Wayne State University, Auburn Center, Auburn institution here in Detroit. And you getting reelected to the Board of Governors. We've seen other individuals who have been reelected to other university board seats, but specifically to speak with you about the university itself in terms of where your vision is for Wayne State University. I know you have a new president in Dr. Espy, right?
Espy, yes.
Dr. Espy. And I kind of want to know what your vision is for the university moving forward as a reelected Board of Governors member.
So, Michigan has really been blessed with a rich history of institutions of higher education. And we have 3 Carnegie R1 research universities in Michigan. And a Carnegie R1 research university means the highest level of research intensity, meaning we're in the top like 1.4% of all the universities and colleges in the country. And there's over 4,000 of them. And though 3 are University of Michigan Ann Arbor, we have Michigan State University in East Lansing, and then Wayne State University is an urban research university because it's located right in the middle of Detroit, as you know. And people always say, well, why should you go to Wayne State University and what makes you different? And one of the things that I think that makes us different is we really welcome first-generation college students. And I want to give you a couple numbers here just to crunch. The mean income of families of our students at Wayne State University is $79,000 a year. The mean income of students at Michigan State University is $164,000 a year, which is more than double Wayne State's. And then if you look at the mean income of families at the University of Michigan, it's $356,000 a year, which is more than double Michigan State's mean family income. So you can see we really serve a different student here in that, and I shouldn't say it's because we have the whole spectrum of students in terms of socioeconomic status, but we really welcome and make feel welcome those students who are first generation college students who come from immigrants and immigrant families. And I like to say that Wayne State University is where the American dream still lives, because we take these students who are hungry to learn and they're high achievers, and we give them the opportunity to spin off in a much higher socioeconomic status than where they start. And so our social mobility index is very high compared to the other institutions.
I think there's no debate around that. But when you look at it's very interesting. I didn't know the median income was $79,000. When you compare that to the average median income in Detroit, which is almost about around 25,000 or 26,000, is even, when it comes to Detroit proper, that's a significant number. 79,000 is a significant number. And I think, Dr. Busuito, the question becomes, how does Wayne State connect? How does it reach those students in Detroit? I mean, outside of, what you just explained, to ensure that they are also benefiting from the perhaps what I would describe as the rich educational inheritance of Wayne State University.
So we have several educational programs that connect directly with students who graduate from Detroit high schools.
Right.
And about 60% of our students pay no tuition. And a lot of them are students from Detroit who come from that socioeconomic status of $25,000 a year family income. And so not only do we welcome them and we encourage them to come, but we have programs to help keep track of them, mentor them. And I got to tell you, people ask me all the time, what are the issues that you have, in higher education now? And I think number one is cost. And I think we need to do a better job of return on investment for education, because we have students who are undertaking majors where they're going to go into debt and they're never going to get it back.
Right.
I think the second thing is enrollment, because like I said, over 4,000 colleges and universities, we're starting to cannibalize one another. And I think Wayne needs to stay alive because of the purpose we serve. But the third thing, and getting back to your question, is student success. It's not just good enough to get them there and give them a free ride. And it's not just good enough there to get them there and they check a box to give us an enrollment statistic. If we don't see to it that they're successful, we failed. And that has become a top priority. And I got to tell you, when we interviewed for a new president, Dr. Espy, who came to us from Texas, that was one of her top priorities, was student success. She says, if you do everything else right, but you don't have successful graduation rates and you don't propel students into careers and make them successful, then why be here? Why do what we do? And that has become one of our major top priorities.
Right. And I remember several years ago, then Wayne State President Alan Gilmore invited me to his office. We had a dialogue because I was upset over a phrase that he purportedly used about Black students joining the military, if you will, if they could not graduate of some sort. But anyway, so I met with Alan Gilmore in his office, and I told him that to his face that was offensive, that he made such a statement and so forth. And he apologized, and took it back and said, and he explained that I think either his nephew or somebody in his family could not graduate, so they went to the military. But he didn't. He said there was no racist connotation or meaning to that. But to cut a long story short, this is where I'm going. So I remember that evening in his office, my conversation with Alan Gilmore, it was just the two of us. And the issue came up about retention. You have these students coming to these universities, they're saddled with student loans, and they're actually not going to graduate. It's almost as if you're setting them up to fail. And we see that sometimes repeated many times across our educational institutions of higher learning. The question, though, is when it comes to the retention question, which has always been an higher educational crisis, what is the Wayne State University experiment or experience?
Before I came onto the board 8 years ago, the 6-year graduation rate for our African-American students was 7%. And that's a terrible, terrible number. And we're approaching the 50% number now. So I mean, that's an astronomical improvement. Can we do better? We can always do better. If you look at the United Negro College Fund statistics, nationwide, it's about 50% for African-American students. But nationwide, it's also getting better, because I think institutions are doing a better job at paying attention to student success. And, if students are not being successful, why? And how do we change it? And I think it's been a nationwide movement. But I think at Wayne, we're doing a spectacular job in improving that. And, you know, I'm proud of it. I think that the university should be proud of it and the state of Michigan should be proud of it.
I want to also talk about educational, this notion of equity and inclusion in higher ed. We've seen a lot of pushback on that in terms of, you know, how open are these universities, you know, their doors to Black and brown and other students of color, or how open are they to all students, regardless of geography and, you know, ethnic heritage and so forth. And you know, in recent times, we've seen, you know, that there's been a pushback from some university administrators across the country because of, you know, maybe hiding under the guise of political correctness and so forth. But I'm just curious, though, in terms of, you know, as someone who sits at the apex of the decision-making policy body of Wayne State University, what your idea and what your goal and what your vision is when it comes to, you know, the amalgamation of higher ed and inclusion as not something that is exclusionary, but something that is an inclusionary merger, if you will.
It's a double-edged sword. It's something you really have to work at.
Right.
If let's talk about diversity. That's a Darwinian principle, and it's been shown since the beginning of time, since we studied genetics, that the more mix you have, the more diversity you have, the stronger the population. And that applies to higher education also. So I think diversity can only strengthen you. When you talk equity, equity is a principle of Marxism. And I think that if you're not careful, you can weaken the organism, the organization. And we see sometimes people are going out, they're accepting students just for the sake of checking boxes, like I said.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
We're not doing anybody any favors.
Check box politics. Go ahead. Yeah.
You're setting the student up for failure, and you're setting up the programs for criticism. Mm-hmm. Now, here's what we found and we've done this. We've taken students, I can tell you in the past, who are just set up for failure just to check the box, and they failed. They're not successful. We didn't do them a favor. We didn't do the institution a favor. But we do know, for instance, and I'm going to use from the standpoint of our medical school, it takes money and tremendous effort to go out and find students, minority students and students of color. They're out there and they're qualified. You just have to find them. But if you're just looking around and taking anybody to say, I'm doing my job, you're going to hurt on both ends. You're going to hurt the institution, and you're going to you're going to attach a stigma to these students.
Yeah.
And then in terms of inclusion,
right,
I'm all for inclusion if it doesn't include exclusion. And what happens, and we see this, for instance, in the medical school, we take kids who are not qualified, they flunk, they get another spot, they flunk, they give it another try. And then we have people come in and say, took up 3 spots 3 years in a row. We excluded 3 students who were perfectly qualified, would have made good physicians, but will never have the opportunity because you took a kid who was not qualified. So you have to do it very carefully.
But you also have to make the investment, though, right? If you want a child to succeed, you know, an institution has to be able to make the investment. I mean, is there a wraparound service? Are there things that the student would need to succeed? You know, and I recall another conversation I've had. I remember several years ago, I sat down with Dave Egner, the head of the Ralph Wilson Foundation. He was the head of the New Economy initiative at the time. And it was myself, Dave Egner, and Carol Goss, who was the president of the Skillman Foundation, in Carol Goss's office. And the question was around inclusion and equity. And Dave Egner raised this issue, basically said to my face, just the 3 of us in the room, said, you know, they're spending all this money, but the results are not coming in and so forth. I said, well, you know, there's also the checkbook diversity tactic, you know, where you want to check the book, check the box and so forth, but you really are not making the strategic investment, and you're not having the right ambassadors or individuals who are willing to be out there, who are connected to the community, to be able to identify what you need to get things done. And I think sometimes institutions have a propensity of falling in that kind of slippery slope, where you're basically checking the box and you have the wrong ambassadors trying to advise the medical school on something that is obviously going to be wrong-headed anyway.
I agree. And we've become cognizant of that. And in fact, using the medical school model again, when our students take exams, the administration gets the results before anybody else, and they will identify students at risk early on. And our administrators and our counselors contact the student before the student even contacts them if they choose to do so. And they let them know that, you fell below what we think is acceptable, and we're going to provide you with tutoring. We're going to provide you with counseling. We're going to provide you with mentoring. It'll cost money, but we're putting that effort in.
Yeah. So moving into 2025, what are you looking to do at the university, at the Board of Governors level? I mean, what are things that you'd like to see?
So, if you look at the natural history of the rebirth of Midwestern burned out cities, and I would include that Detroit was one.
Right.
And
from the ashes, out of the ashes.
Yep. Studies have been done as to what happens, how can you be successful? The common denominator is in that in all these instances, at the center of the rebirth is a major research university. And in Detroit, it's Wayne State University. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to do everything in our power, number one, to maintain our R1 research status. And we're not in danger of losing it or anything, but I think we need to take our research to the next level. And number two, we have to continue to be a magnet organization for students who are first generation college students. And I got to tell you, I think these kids are high achievers to levels you would not believe. And they come to us with no family members who ever went to college. And I was one of those. I was the only one of my family who ever went to college at the time I went to college. And, I went to Wayne's med school, and I just remember it being a very welcoming atmosphere for someone like me. I went undergrad at the University of Michigan. I remember a couple of years ago at the University of Michigan, there were a couple undergraduate students, I think there were two women, who wrote a book on how to survive at the University of Michigan as a student if you don't come from a wealthy family. Just the fact that students would find it necessary to write a book like that tells me a story that you can find yourself in situations where no matter how smart you are, no matter what the color of your skin is, you can be made to feel unwelcome.
Right.
We're very, very sensitive to that. And like I said, I want to make sure that this university serves a purpose other than what Michigan State does. Great research university, University of Michigan, world-class research university, and so are we. But like I said, we have a little bit different mission. We have a little bit of a different type of student. And I want to build upon that to make it better.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. It's always a pleasure to be with you, Bankole.
All right.